The post-war scramble, from V2 to victory and the moral compromise. The end of World War II did not mark the end of conflict. It merely ushered in a new, technologically driven arms race between the victorious Allies, primarily the United States and the Soviet Union. This shift immediately exposed a grim truth. Victory in the next global conflict would be determined not by brute force, but by superior science and engineering. The ultimate prize in this post-war scramble was not territory, but the intellectual capital of the defeated Third Reich. Specifically, the scientists responsible for Germany's revolutionary V-weapons and aviation research. This is the origin story of Operation Paperclip. Officially initiated by the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1945, Operation Paperclip was the secret government-sanctioned project to identify, recruit, and covertly extract thousands of German scientists, engineers, and technicians from the collapsing Reich and bring them to the United States. The official justification was to secure valuable knowledge and prevent these mines from falling into Soviet hands. Operation Aviation was the equivalent Soviet effort. However, the hidden truth lies in the sheer scale of the moral compromise that followed. The target scientists were not just brilliant minds. Many held high ranks in the Nazi Party, were members of the SS, and were directly implicated in war crimes, specifically through the use of forced labor at concentration camps, like Mittelwerk, where the V2 rockets were produced under horrific conditions. The key conspiratorial element of Paperclip was the systematic whitewashing of their backgrounds. U.S. Army personnel were ordered to remove or destroy any incriminating evidence of Nazi affiliation and war crimes from the scientists' service records, literally clipping a paperclip to new fabricated dossiers to expedite security clearance. The most notorious recruit was Wernher von Braun, the chief architect of the V2 rocket program. While his genius was undeniable, his close ties to the SS and his awareness of the forced labor used in his facilities presented a profound ethical crisis. The U.S. government, driven by the urgency of the Cold War and the fear of a Soviet technological lead, made a cold, calculated decision. The technological imperative outweighed the ethical mandate. The brilliant Nazi was given a fresh start, a clean record, and became the revered figure who would eventually shape America's space program, culminating in the moon landing. This part of the series will establish the initial moral corruption at the heart of the American scientific empire. It reveals the ultimate betrayal of justice. The very individuals who had built the terror weapons of the Reich were now being secretly funded and protected by the U.S. government, all in the name of national security. The true motive behind Paperclip was not just to win the space race, but to seamlessly transfer the entire technological doctrine of the defeated enemy into the hands of the victor, ensuring the survival of a specific, aggressive vision for future warfare and exploration. The V2 blueprint, how Nazi rocketry became the foundation for NASA's Saturn V. The recruitment of German scientists under Operation Paperclip, Part 1, was not merely a brain drain. It was a wholesale acquisition of the foundational blueprints for the space age. At the core of this technological transfer was the V2 rocket, a weapon that, despite its horrific use in terrorizing civilian populations, was the world's first true ballistic missile and the direct ancestor of every modern space launch vehicle. The narrative of the Cold War and the space race cannot be understood without acknowledging that America's initial technological supremacy was literally built on Nazi bedrock. The V2 rocket, developed under the technical leadership of Wernher von Braun at the Peenemünde facility, represented a quantum leap in engineering. It utilized liquid fuel, ethanol and liquid oxygen, and a sophisticated guidance system that allowed it to reach the edge of space before descending supersonically. While the Allies focused primarily on conventional air power, the Nazis had solved the fundamental problem of escaping Earth's atmosphere, a scientific achievement that became the most sought-after prize of the war. When U.S. forces, under the command of Colonel Holger Toftoy, moved into the remnants of the German rocket facilities, their mission was simple: gather all physical hardware and, more importantly, all intellectual property. They recovered over 100 fully assembled V2 rockets and over 14,000 pages of technical documentation, shipping them secretly back to the United States. This hardware and knowledge immediately gave the US a massive, undeniable head start over the Soviet Union. The true impact of this transfer is visible in the evolution of American rocketry. Von Braun and his team were first deployed to Fort Bliss, Texas, and later to the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Their immediate task was not to develop new concepts, but to refine and scale the V-2 technology. The result was a direct linear progression. The V-2 led to the Redstone rocket, which powered America's first satellite. The Redstone led to the Jupiter and Juno rockets. And finally, the ultimate evolution of the V-2 blueprint was the monumental Saturn V rocket, the engine of the Apollo program that successfully put humans on the moon. The Saturn V, while vastly larger and more powerful, maintained the core design philosophy and many engineering solutions pioneered by the German team years earlier. The conspiracy lies not in the technological lineage, which is undeniable, but in the official omission of the V-2's role as the fundamental, originating force. The narrative was carefully sanitized. America won the space race through democratic ingenuity, not through the exploitation of a defeated totalitarian regime's illicit research, which included the use of concentration camp slave labor to assemble the core technology. The legacy of the V-2 is therefore deeply conflicted. It represents both a monumental leap for science and a profound moral stain on the foundation of NASA. The ethical compromise. The secret files that expose Paperclip, scientists' moral lapses, the technical achievements secured by Operation Paperclip, Parts 1 and 2, acquiring the V-2 designs and propelling the US into the space age, demanded a tremendous moral sacrifice. The controversy surrounding Paperclip centers directly on the systematic historical revision and concealment of past affiliations held by the very scientists welcomed into the United States government and, eventually, NASA. The US government effectively prioritized technological supremacy over a complete accounting of ethical conduct. The most sensitive area of investigation involves the production of the V-2 rockets at the Mittelwerk underground complex. This facility relied heavily on a specialized labor force, individuals detained under harsh government restrictions, to produce the crucial weapons. Testimonies and historical files indicate that working conditions were profoundly difficult, and the complex was associated with a high cost of human life due to the severe environment and strenuous demands placed on the laborers. Key personnel recruited under Paperclip, most notably Werner von Braun and his deputy, Arthur Rudolph, held critical supervisory roles over this industrial complex. While these figures later attempted to distance themselves from the full scale of the facility's brutal operations, internal documents suggest their intimate familiarity with the labor management, disciplinary actions, and the profound hardships faced by the detained workers. Rudolph, who was later pivotal in the Saturn V development, faced serious allegations concerning the oversight of the workforce based on detailed historical records. The methods used to implement the cover-up were highly coordinated. The US intelligence apparatus was directed to systematically sanitize records, specifically instructed to alter or destroy documentation that detailed the scientists' involvement with high-level party organizations or their managerial roles in the specialized labor sectors. Dossiers were reconstructed, and sensitive information related to their past associations was strategically clipped and filed away, giving rise to the operation's famous name. This was a clear, institutionalized act of historical obfuscation, designed to shield individuals whose past required profound scrutiny. Conspiracy theorists argue that this ethical shadow is the hidden truth beneath the gleaming public image of the American space program. The secrecy was vital not only to preempt Soviet intelligence, but also to shield the American public from the truth that the iconic moon program's foundation rests upon a technology developed under a regime whose practices involved the ruthless exploitation of human life. The American elite made a deliberate choice to ignore moral accountability in the relentless pursuit of unparalleled technological advantage. Beyond rockets, the recruitment of chemical and aviation warfare specialists. While the narrative of Operation Paperclip Parts 1 to 3, is largely dominated by the transfer of rocket scientists like Wernher von Braun. The true scope of the project extended far beyond rocketry, encompassing nearly every field of advanced warfare and technology developed by the former regime. The hidden truth is that the US government, in its desperate drive for Cold War superiority, systematically imported expertise in areas considered ethically problematic, including specialists in aviation, aerodynamics, and advanced chemical and biological research. This broader recruitment effort underscores the total commitment to technological acquisition, regardless of the ethical cost. The recruitment of aviation specialists was critical. Scientists who had worked on advanced experimental aircraft, including those developing jet propulsion and swept-wing designs that laid the groundwork for modern American fighter jets, were highly prized. The expertise gained from these German engineers allowed the US Air Force to bypass years of costly research and development, rapidly accelerating its own jet-age capabilities. The sudden dramatic evolution of American aviation technology in the early 1950s is direct evidence of this covert technology transfer. Perhaps the most ethically disturbing sector of recruitment involved individuals from the former Reich's programs in chemical and biological defense research. While public awareness often focuses on the space race, documents reveal that the US brought over key individuals involved in highly controversial research programs. These scientists were integrated into facilities such as Fort Detrick and Edgewood Arsenal, institutions centrally involved in the US military's own chemical and biological defense efforts. The justification for recruiting these specialists, despite their deeply questionable backgrounds and associations with programs utilizing severely restricted research methods, was the imperative to understand the enemy's capabilities and, crucially, to maintain a competitive edge. The architects of Paperclip understood that knowledge itself was the ultimate weapon. By acquiring these specialists, the US was not just securing blueprints, it was importing a complete scientific doctrine, a methodology of aggressive, rapid technological development unconstrained by traditional ethical boundaries. The conspiracy here is twofold. Not only did the US government conceal the past activities of the individuals, but it also silently incorporated their research ethos into the fabric of American military and defense science. This part of the series reveals that Paperclip was an all-encompassing project of technological appropriation. The importation of these non-rocket specialists demonstrates that the US strategic goal was the comprehensive dominance of all scientific fields relevant to global power, built upon a foundation of scientific expertise extracted directly from the defeated totalitarian state and hidden from the American public. The pursuit of scientific knowledge became a clandestine operation that permanently altered the moral and technological landscape of the American defense establishment. The public relations miracle, selling the Nazi scientist to the American public. The clandestine transfer of hundreds of German scientists and engineers to the United States under Operation Paperclip, Parts 1-4, presented a colossal challenge to the American government: how to publicly justify employing individuals whose past affiliations were profoundly compromising. The US intelligence agencies and military establishment executed what can only be described as a public relations miracle, systematically rebranding these figures from former assets of a totalitarian regime into celebrated American heroes and indispensable pioneers of the space age. The need for this propaganda effort was immediate and intense. The American public, having just sacrificed millions of lives and vast resources to defeat the enemy, would never have tolerated the integration of the enemy's leading minds into federal programs if the full truth were known. The solution was the creation of a sanitized, compelling narrative of redemption and necessity. Central to this public image campaign was Wernher von Braun. His transformation was a masterclass in media manipulation. His genial, articulate personality, coupled with his unambiguous scientific genius, made him the perfect symbol for the program. He was presented as the ultimate apolitical scientist, a brilliant mind, focused solely on exploration and discovery, forced to work under the harsh conditions of the former regime, but whose true loyalty lay with the advancement of humankind. He began appearing in popular magazines, giving lectures and starring in films and television programs produced by figures like Walt Disney, where he advocated for space travel and the peaceful use of rockets. This media exposure effectively erased his association with the V-2 terror weapon and the unfortunate labor practices at Mittelwerk. The success of this public relations effort was tied to the Cold War hysteria. By framing the recruitment as an existential necessity to beat the Soviet Union, the other enemy, the US government generated broad public support. The moral compromise was rhetorically framed as a pragmatic strategic move. It was not a matter of choice, but of survival against communism. Any attempt by journalists or politicians to raise questions about the scientists' past was quickly dismissed as either being unpatriotic or as spreading red propaganda. This systematic rebranding extended to the scientists' professional placement. By integrating them into the newly formed NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, in 1958, the former German specialists were instantly transitioned from military assets to civilian explorers. NASA's mission of peaceful international exploration provided the perfect moral cover, laundering the scientists' past activities under the banner of humanity's loftiest goal, reaching the stars. The conspiracy reveals that the true achievement of Paperclip was not just launching rockets, but successfully launching a lie so profound that it redefined the history of the entire space age in the public mind. The institutional legacy: how Nazi scientific ethos influenced American programs. The most subtle and enduring component of the Paperclip conspiracy, Parts 1-5, is not the physical transfer of rockets or the rebranding of scientists, but the insidious institutionalization of a specific, aggressive scientific ethos within the core of the American military and space programs. Proponents argue that by importing the German scientific leadership, the US also silently adopted their highly centralized, results-oriented, and ethically detached approach to research and development. This German methodology, forged under the intense pressure of a total war effort, prioritized rapid technological achievement above all other concerns, including cost, bureaucracy, and, as discussed, moral constraints. When figures like Wernher von Braun and his key associates were placed in leadership positions, guiding the development of American missile programs and later, the crucial NASA initiatives, they implemented this same demanding, top-down structure. They brought with them a culture where the achievement of the objective, e.g., reaching the moon, developing a new weapon, became the sole metric of success, often bypassing the slower, more collaborative and ethically cautious processes common in democratic academic research environments. One critical manifestation of this imported ethos was the focus on unconventional research and experimental extremes. German scientists recruited for fields beyond rocketry, such as aviation and medical defense, brought with them knowledge derived from research that was conducted without regard for international ethical guidelines. While their expertise was invaluable to US counterintelligence and defense efforts, the methodologies they introduced, even if modified, led to a shift towards a more aggressive and secretive research style within US government programs. The drive for secrecy and classification, already high during the Cold War, was intensified by the need to protect not only new research, but also the highly controversial origins of the underlying scientific knowledge itself. Von Braun's team maintained extraordinary cohesion and influence within NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. This allowed them to steer the direction of American space policy, ensuring that their vision, a vision rooted in the strategic thinking of the former regime, remained the guiding force behind the nation's most expensive and visible technological efforts, culminating in the Saturn V program. The conspiracy theorists contend that this legacy is why American scientific achievement, while unparalleled, often operates behind layers of classification and maintains a degree of ethical ambiguity in certain sensitive areas. Paperclip ensured that the US did not just inherit German technology. It inherited the German technological imperative, a powerful, unrelenting drive that forever changed the character of American governmental science, prioritizing the pursuit of extreme scientific capability at any moral or institutional cost. The final disclosure: the unseen costs and the enduring legacy of Paperclip. This final part of our series brings us to the ultimate cost and the enduring hidden legacy of Operation Paperclip, parts 1 to 6. The project successfully achieved its immediate strategic goals, preventing Soviet acquisition of German intellectual property and propelling the United States to undeniable technological dominance, culminating in the historic triumph of the Apollo moon landing. Yet the price paid for this victory was a permanent, profound erosion of both ethical and historical integrity within America's core institutions. The conspiracy theorists argue that the operation created a continuous, self-protecting infrastructure of secrecy. The initial necessity of concealing the scientists' past affiliations during the Cold War became an ingrained bureaucratic habit. The spirit of compartmentalization and absolute secrecy, perfected by the former regime's scientific establishment, found a fertile new home within the American military-industrial complex. The enduring ethical cost is perhaps the most significant revelation. The decision to prioritize specialized knowledge over justice was not a one-time compromise. It set a powerful, dark precedent. It communicated that in the pursuit of scientific and military advantage, the United States government was willing to circumvent its own stated values. This precedent is argued to have influenced subsequent American policies on technology acquisition and intelligence operations for decades, creating a perpetual state of ethical ambiguity at the highest levels of power. By the 1970s and 1980s, public and congressional inquiries slowly began to reveal some of the suppressed truths about paperclip scientists, including the extent of the document falsification. However, by that time, the figures in question had already achieved national hero status, and the narrative of the space race was irreversible. The initial lie had become the accepted official history. The few attempts to deport or prosecute the less prominent paperclip figures only served to highlight how deeply entrenched and protected the most crucial assets, like von Braun, had become. The ultimate conclusion of the Operation Paperclip story is a sobering one. The history of the world's most impressive scientific achievement, sending humanity to the moon, is inextricably linked to a profound act of moral expediency. The program did not just build NASA's rockets, it built a shadow structure within the American system, demonstrating that, when pressed by existential competition, the global elite will always choose strategic, technological advantage over the rigorous demands of ethical accountability. The legacy of Paperclip is the constant, unseen tension between American ideals and the ruthlessly pragmatic technological imperatives necessary to maintain global power.